This is Series 3 of Away, a podcast for anyone exploring 12-step sobriety. I'm your host, Steph Roberts. And with that, my girl Susan.
Hi everyone, I'm Susan. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi Susan.
What can I say? I love drinking. I'm an alcoholic. And Steph and I were just talking about the fact that I'm coming up on 5 years this December. And it is pretty amazing because I've been drinking and thinking about drinking for a long time. I would say that I started drinking around the age of 13, and there were other things that I did at that time, very heavily involved in the whole 70s, drug scene of Quaaludes and psychedelics and going to Grateful Dead concerts and all of that. And, but it introduced me to the world of drugs and alcohol at a young age. And, so when I say that I've been doing it a long time, there had been periods in my life, and maybe some of you can identify, that I didn't drink. And the drugs pretty much stopped, by the way. And but the obsession with alcohol, and I call it an obsession, maybe you've heard that before, obsession, and then you have the craving after you have that, was always there, even when I didn't drink. And the expression goes like maybe you're a dry drunk or something. I didn't know any of this terminology, by the way. I just thought I was a girl who liked to drink, then a woman who liked to drink. Excuse me, it relaxed me. I was able to deal better with some of life's problems. This is what we're talking about. The problems didn't make me an alcoholic, but when I had the problems and I could have my alcohol, it sure looked better on the outside. Okay, I think many of you can identify with that. The second, and I didn't. I just thought I was having a good time. I just thought, okay, I'll go out, but I always did drink and drug a little bit more than the next person. But as I said, I couldn't identify myself as an alcoholic. Even though both of my parents did drink, but I only found that out after I got into the program, because they were sort of like this is really not your high functioning alcoholics. I've come to believe there really isn't any, but they had jobs, they raised a family, they didn't lose everything, kind of like my story. But that doesn't mean anything to me anymore. The more I hear stories and the more I talk to people, the identification of that obsession, that craving, is what is our commonality. And I also found out that it doesn't matter, male, female, how smart you are, where you came from, rich, poor. And so I began to learn that, and that was quite amazing. That it has nothing to do, with, what happened to me. But I will explain some of the things, in my life, especially early, trauma, and feeling, less than or afraid, terribly afraid and anxious, I would have described myself. But at the same time, I did love life, but I was afraid. And so when I would drink, life became more tolerable. It became better. So as I said, I'm just going to go back a little bit. When I was younger, it was a party scene, and I didn't, who knows? A lot of those people, God forbid, aren't even around. Some of them are alcoholics, some of them are not. I don't know. Okay. During the 80s, I kind of grew up a little bit, got a good job, got married, moved to Long Island from the city. So naturally, what could be wrong? I was drinking, but not, as you'd say, alcoholically, but every time I drank, I was getting drunk. I liked the feeling of it. That's the thing that gets me. That's what we were talking about. That I can remember that I really liked it. But then the next thought that comes into my mind is how bad it made me feel and how much how degraded I felt, and how what I was trying to fight against by drinking came back and really hit me in the head, which is my fear and my anxiety. Like I was trying to get rid of that by drinking. I was trying to make my world a better world by drinking, and actually what wound up happening, or winds up happening, is that it becomes that much worse, that much more humiliating, and that much more degrading. But of course I didn't know that, so then I got married, wonderful guy, 2 beautiful children. They went, again, I drank at dinners, weddings, always a little bit more, but and I think some of you may or may not have heard, this is a progressive disease. So I had been doing it, since I was about 13, 14, some form of, self-medicating myself and enjoying myself at the same time. And it wasn't really until my 50s that things came shattering down. And that looks different for a lot of people. For me, I'll explain some of the reasons, and I didn't want to recognize the fact, because I didn't want anyone to take my alcohol away from me. I wanted to drink. I liked it, I enjoyed it, and also I may add that I didn't suffer some of the and it doesn't really matter either. I was going to say I didn't suffer some of the dire consequences, although I will say during my drinking a lot, and I mean like every day, I mean like vodka. I don't mean like sipping on wine, not that you can't be an alcoholic with wine or beer or anything. I mean, it's not what you drink or how much. It's really that obsession that you think about it, you want it, and other things become secondary in your life. Even your own children, your husband, your home, your job, and what have you. But what I was going to say is I was diagnosed with cancer, and all I could think about after I was done, and I was grateful, that everything worked out okay. And right after I finished having chemotherapy, what do you think I did? I had a drink. Yeah. I mean, in other words, that's how sick. In other words, so I didn't have to I'm expressing this to you so that you know what I've been through, in the fact that that's not what you call normal drinking. If you have a serious illness, besides alcoholism, and then which I didn't know I was alcoholic, then I just thought, well, I'm nervous, I need my drink, I want to have a good time, I'm bored, I'm lonely, whatever excuse I wanted to give it, okay? And then there was just a lot of other things that made me an alcoholic: hiding liquor, lying to myself, lying to my family about my drinking. Might seem like a small thing, but it just shows you how this is the way the alcoholic mind thinks. I knew it wasn't right. Like I had a bar in my house, and I started to drink the good liquor in the bar, and then they started to notice. So what do you think the alcoholic did? She went to the liquor store and bought her pint of cheap vodka, so nobody else would say that, where's the, well, how come you drink, and that's not normal drinking. There's a lot of other things that I'm ashamed of, and things I did. I did drive in the car with my kids with more alcohol in my system than I should have. Was I blackout drunk? No, but it really doesn't matter. I've learned that it really doesn't matter the degree of how drunk you are, or what, like I said, what you're drinking. It's that the thinking is so off. And I used to say to myself, well, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm home drinking. This was my greatest excuse. And now I've learned that, well, that's not true. Because what if the phone rings and you're needed and you're like drunk? What if you get so drunk, you fall down the stairs, you break your head, and then, you're in the hospital or you're dead? You're not just drinking at home. It doesn't matter. Because there were times, as I said, I would get a call. I had to pick one of my kids up. And also I remember being angry, like, ooh, I can't pick you up. I don't want to pick you, because I knew it was wrong to drive, but I did it anyway. And of course I drank a lot and drove a lot as in the 70s, but of course, as you may or may not know, they didn't care what you did in the 70s with drinking and driving. The car wrecks I got into and everything. That was just amazing. And thankfully how we came around, I was always like didn't know where I parked my car and everything, but now I'm in a home, so luckily, I know where I parked my, hopefully. But let me just tell you what my aha moment was. My daughter noticed how much I was drinking, and there was one night we went out, And I called an Uber, knew to call the Uber, but, because I knew I was drinking before and I knew I wanted to get drunk. I loved that feeling of getting drunk. It just, that's that obsession. I really, really loved it. And she got so angry, that was going to be the breaking point. And I love my family. I love my family. And I looked in her eyes and I looked in her face and I said, I got to get out. This is really going sour really quickly. And let me tell you, I've only learned since how sour it's going to go, okay? So I feel, fortunate that I made that decision. And it's a decision to go as what is that, step 3? Decided? Okay. I'm just talking about my sponsor. I decided to make that decision to do this program. And I've never looked back. I've never looked back. When I went in, I treat my sobriety very carefully. I know it's it can go. It can go. And what do I do? What did I do, I should say? When I got there, I immediately got a wonderful sponsor, which I didn't know at the time. I said, sponsor? What sponsor? What's AA? I knew nothing. If I tell you I knew nothing, okay, which I don't know is better or worse, I don't know, but I just decided I have to give this a try, because if I don't, I'm looking at alienating my family and worse. And I wasn't doing anything with my life. I was always depressed. I was always crying. I didn't look well. I was always puffy. I had cancer, as I said. Listen, did my excess of drinking cause the cancer? Well, it certainly couldn't have helped. When you drink excessively, you're in for getting a lot of diseases that they say that alcohol is a known reason, whether it be heart or diabetes or cancer. It's just a very abusive thing. So I don't like to say that I caused my cancer. I'll never know. But I was really drinking heavily and warned against it. And I have a history of cancer in my family. So I knew I was playing with a time bomb. And I didn't care. That's very sick. That's very sick thinking. Very sick thinking. Anyhow, what did I do? I got a home group. It was in my neighborhood. I had dabbled, to see other meetings as I was, called out by my therapist, which I, again, said I'm not an alcoholic. But I had that aha moment. I said, I'm going to go in, and I really can't do this anymore. Because I had tried to stop drinking, and, I couldn't do that. That's a telltale sign. I don't stop for a month or 3 weeks, and I always started drinking again. And that's another way and I just said, well, I did stop, so maybe I can stop, but I didn't stop. So if you stop for a week, a day, a month, that's not stopping. That's not stopping, because you can't wait to have that next drink. You kind of reward yourself.
Then you think you get up.
Yeah, exactly. So, and what I did the steps. I said, my sponsor said, we're going to read from the book. She was kind enough and wonderful enough and giving enough to give of her time. And that's what it's about. And we read the book, we did the steps, and I have a sponsee also. I'm willing to sponsor. I talk at meetings. And I'm happy, which I never thought I could be happy without drinking. And I always connected the two. Somewhere in my brain, they became connected. And by doing the steps, doing the program, and everyone does, it's the same steps, but not oddly enough, it's your program, it's your steps, do them. There's no, you have to do it this way, this is the only way, the book says it. I believe that you do the steps, and if you do it with your heart, and you have a sponsor, and you're very serious about getting sober, you will be given the promises that they say. It will happen for you. I'm a living example, and you've heard other living examples. Today I have a wonderful relationship with the best thing I want to share about being sober now, and I do credit AA, because I couldn't do it on my own. That's the other thing. I could not do it. I tried. And this is what worked. That I came to AA, they said, I will help you. And that was my experience. Not only my sponsor, but everyone in my home group, was willing to talk and take the time. Where do you find that? And it's genuine. Nobody was being phony about wanting to help. And the fact that I look forward, that I'm able to deal with life without alcohol, that's pretty amazing for me. Because like I said, I've been drinking most of my life. That's an amazing thing. And we were talking, it's not that I don't ever think about alcohol, but I immediately think about the horrible consequences. And I am not willing to give up the happiness, the peace of mind, how I'm growing and learning today. Because I also feel that because I had picked up at such an early age, that all of my growth and all of what I knew about life kind of stopped then. And I never, you've heard this, I've never really grew up, and now is my time. And I am so, I'm mostly happy, and if I'm not happy, that's things happen, I get sick, I did have problems in sobriety. My son became very, very ill, and I was glad that I was sober, because then I could be of help. It didn't cause me to drink. What I thought, like if I had a bad day, I deal with it. Or I look, what can I learn from that bad day? Or who can help me? Asking for help. Super, super big. Because most alcoholics, or this alcoholic, hated asking for help. I hated to put my hand, I don't know, I'm messed up. I felt, if I felt less than, I felt worse than less than asking for help. So that was huge for me. And now it's fine. I love to learn. If you can help me in any way, outside of AA or in AA, I'm delighted. Let me hear what you have to say. So again, what we often say in AA is I came for my drinking, but I stayed for my thinking. It's the thinking, because there's so many dry drunks out there. If you want, there are a lot of people who have a lot of willpower, and I'm not going to drink, but they're miserable SOBs. You wouldn't want to be around them. You probably want to give them a drink or a shot of something. And what I'm trying to say is when you work the steps and when you give to others, that's what makes a difference. I couldn't do it with that. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know my thinking. I couldn't, there were things that were just selfish and just not the proper way. I mean, proper isn't that word, but not healthy. Not healthy for me, the world, or you. And I find that when I cleaned that up, when I cleaned up some of that in me, then it wasn't. I didn't feel as big a need to drink, because I understood a lot more about who I was and what I could offer, and that was making me happy. To know that I could give, people could give to me. It was a beautiful feeling, but I never knew that when I was drinking. And so all of my relationships, I have a job now. I hadn't worked for over 20 years. I didn't think I could get out and work. I thought I was, just a nothing, a big nothing. And that made me depressed to think that I was a big nothing. But what it was the drinking. It was preventing me from growing, getting out there. And so I said to myself, well, I'm going to give AA a try, because I have really nothing to lose. What do I have to lose? I said, I'll make friends, I'll become sober. That's a wonderful thing. Yeah, it's a good thing. So, am I good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you. I'm Susan, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Woo!
Oh. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce our next speaker.
Who's that?
Who is that? Who we got? We have Stephanie, who is an alcoholic and my sponsor and one of the most wonderful people I know.
Yay me! Hi, I'm Steph. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Steph.
And a cocaine addict. And a wonderful sponsor. I'm amazing. That is, by the way, not something I could have even joked about 9 years ago, or even 15 years ago when I first came in. I was a relapser, but not like a day. I came in for 4 years, and I didn't drink. I didn't do the work. I didn't help anyone else. I just went to meetings and bitched and moaned about my life. Woe is me, woe is me, woe is me. But I do think those 4 years saved my life, and I do think the reason I could even have done those 4 years was AA, was the community around me of people who genuinely wanted to help me. Now, is it a microcosm of the real world? Sure. Are there some assholes in there? Of course. Do you have to a degree, keep your wits about you? Yeah. But that's why we have sponsorship, and that's why we say women with the women and men with the men, at least in the beginning, until your instincts are sort of revived a little, and you can tell the creeps from the non-creeps. I found a lot of the creeps in the first 4 years. Woo! Yeah. The men, though, fantastic examples of mental health and happiness.
Yes, right.
No sex addiction there. So I came in, I stayed dry for 4 years. I didn't get happy. I put down alcohol and cocaine, and I picked up food. And in those 4 years, and then the 3 years after, when I was drinking, and I kept the food, I blew up to 260 pounds. So now I was fat and miserable and drunk. But I'm going to go back into the beginnings of my story, because some of it's a little bit funny, some of it's sad. I was adopted when I was 6 weeks old. At the time when kids were put up for adoption, one of the ways they did it was to take you away from your biological mother immediately, so no bonding, which we know now is important, put you into foster care with a mother for 6 to 8 weeks, and then bring you to your adoptive parents. So the one person with whom you feel safe as a baby, then you're ripped away from and put with complete strangers. It's only now that psychology is addressing this kind of thing that and I think it's really important, that our nervous systems, in essence, in those years, experience the trauma, whether we remember it in our minds later or not. So, immediately, out of the gate, I don't feel safe. I look back at my story when I was 4 years. First of all, I grew up. My adoptive parents were well off. I had a comfortable, nice life. I lived on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. We had a house in Southampton. I went to a beach club. But if I look back in my story, for real look back, and I didn't see this until a few years into sobriety, I felt so uncomfortable and so unsafe from a young age. So I would go to this beach club in the summer, and the parents all went to the beach and drank something called beachcombers. I don't really know what they are to this day. My best friend and I would finish them off when they, secretly go up to the bar and finish other people's at the bar. We're 4 and 5. I mean, we're already in there. But that, that's another story, the sort of functioning alcoholics. I'm from a very waspy culture, right? So there's no emotion. It's you drink. And around me always were drinkers. So it was a part of my life from a young age. So at 4 years old, I used to go to this beach club, and there were all these little downy, pretty, blonde baby kids, beautiful, Bo and Blair. It's the early 80s, it's the facts of life, man. Blair, they're all around me, and I feel fat, and I wasn't these things, but in my head I felt different from them. I felt very unsafe among them. I felt fat and ugly already. My mom didn't help that any by depriving me of food and telling me I was fat when I was 5, but whatever, thanks, Mom. So, and that surely contributed, right? But as Susan said, that's not why I'm an alcoholic. All these little things are not what make me one. But so we would learn how to swim in the ocean by holding onto a rope, with knots, and you'd all walk in. And I wouldn't do it. I was terrified. I didn't learn how to ride a bike till I was 15, because I was terrified. I never felt safe, not with the people who were meant to take care of me, but also not within myself, right? I didn't feel good enough, and I was terrified of the failure, of the humiliation. That early, that was more so, I feel, looking back, more so than my schoolmates and my peers, much more so, because they would do it anyway. They would risk the humiliation or the failure, and they understood that as a part of growing and getting better at things. So, needless to say, I would sit with the leader of the play group that would teach us how to do scary things. And I would eat with her mother in the kitchen because my mother wasn't giving me any food. And that was the beginning of my addiction. My first addiction was food. So by 10 or 11, I'm going to school alone already. The city probably wasn't a great idea. But my parents both worked, so I was put on the bus, and I started stealing money. And I started stealing a 20 here and a 20 there, and there was a place up by my school called the $1 Million Deli, and I would buy food at the end of the day, and I would bring it home in my backpack, and I would eat, and I would hide the wrappers. I mean, clearly parents find the wrappers if you don't actually throw them away. But, I would eat and eat and eat and eat. So my mom's, meanwhile, like, why are you getting fatter? Like, I'm starving you. Why are you getting fatter? But that's where I see the first addiction and the obsession for the food, man. Like, it was there. Stealing money at a young age to buy food, that's weird, right? That is actually a little bit weird. So the thinking's already showing up at 10 or 11. And then 13 is real. I mean, I've always been drinking in my life. My parents didn't prohibit it. It was always around. It was a part of my culture. So it wasn't a scary thing to me, and I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go rebel. I started smoking and drinking probably in little bits around 12, but by 13, I was at this prep school, and again, it was all these, like, in my perception, my fucked up perception, all these perfect, beautiful, wealthy people. My father lost his job. My mother started a catering business, working all the time, so they were never home, trying to keep up this lifestyle, keep up with the Joneses, right? But meanwhile, they're not around. They're never there to watch me to do anything. Now we're sort of broke. We're really scrounging. My mother's always, like, ginning up this fear of, like, we're going to be homeless. Like my dad needed that, his ego, right? I mean, his ego was just like, she treated him awfully. Anyway, so now we're broke, and I'm fat or fatter than my classmates. I just feel so different from. I remember once one of my wealthy, and one of the nicest girls ever, who never would have judged me, one of the wealthiest girls in my class was coming over for a play date, and I set the table the night before with all our best china and our family silver, and then when she came over, I lied to her and I said the maid had done it during the day for us to have dinner. Like, like I really felt less than and different. So I pulled away from those people, and I found there were these sort of bad boys from uptown who used to hang out around the school. One of them, weed dealer. Another one I didn't find out later till he died from an overdose, was dealing heroin. But so I fell in with them, and they were uptown boys. Like, we hung out on 135th and Lenox. I don't know if you know the area, in the early 90s. I don't look the part. I'm certainly not going to sleep to the sound of gunshots. And I am walking her. I put my hair up on top of my head, tight. I wore bamboo earrings, and I would walk like an OG, like I, like what? I mean, I still, I'm still like a blonde-ish kid. But it felt better for me. Like, I felt like a part of, and these men, and they were men. I was 13 or 14, and they were 18, 19, 20. But these men, I felt safer with them than I'd ever felt in any other group of people, and they accepted me, I felt like, for who I was. And they drank more similarly to me, like 14 years old, 15 years old, I'm hanging out on 135th and Lenox, drinking a couple of 40s a night, and something called Cisco, which, if, I don't know, depending on your generation, it's like really potent, cheap wine or port. And we used to call it crack juice, and we would totally get, like, we loved it, because it was like doing a shot, but you could get it at the bodega. And I was smoking pot and doing, all this stuff. But this was I want to say mostly weekends, but it was after school a lot. My parents weren't home. It didn't matter. Fast forward. This is through high school. I'm getting into more trouble, though. My parents are kind of catching on a little bit, and they're getting mad all the time. And I was like, I better start hanging out with the prep school kids a little bit. They seem to be getting into less trouble, and they aren't as bad. Well, turns out, prep school boys, woo, they can drink. And there's a bar on the Upper East Side called Dorian's, and they don't card. This is where, I don't know if you remember the Central Park guy who strangled that woman in the park. That's where he was the night he killed her. So that's the kind of people I'm hanging out with. They may be wearing Oxford shirts, but they're not okay. And they're all drinking the way I'm drinking. Dorian's, but very similar to the same idea, right? absolutely. So I become a chameleon at that point. So I can weave in and out of all kinds of different crowds. I find my way with alcohol. I am still filled with fear and anxiety, right? I told you I hadn't learned to ride a bike till I was 15 because I was so worried about failure and humiliation. Alcohol is the elixir for that. Alcohol made me able to fit in anywhere. It also made it very difficult to bond with anyone and have any real close relationships, but that didn't matter to me. I didn't know a close relationship. I didn't know what it meant. Alcohol was everything. And I think to this day, because I wasn't medicated, I am well medicated now for anxiety. Lexapro is, after AA, the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm not kidding. Like, it's not a hotbed of mental health. Think about it. There might be a stigma, but think about it. It is easier to stay sober if you have another mental condition that you properly medicate. It just makes it easier. And I don't mean with Valium or Xanax. I mean with the proper medication. I do think that drinking saved my life. For those years through high school into college, it medicated things that I had suicidal ideation as a teenager, but with alcohol, I didn't act on it. I knew I had an elixir. I knew I had a way through it. I knew I had an answer. And it was an answer, and it was fun. I mean, there were moments of real fun. Quickly in college, though, I became a blackout drinker. A lot of bad things happened to me that, regardless of me being drunk, I was the victim of. At the time, I didn't understand I was a victim, and I entirely blamed myself for them, so there was an immense amount of shame around those situations. And then there were also situations I chose to be in that were pretty ugly, pretty gross. If I had a daughter, this is why I can't have kids. I feel like I'd have to lock her up until she was old enough. It would be old school. I'd be you're marrying who I say, when I say, So college looks bad. I'm missing classes, whatever. At the end of college, my last year, my dad dies from cancer. It's been a long, slow, suffering, horrible death. He was much older than my mother. He was a World War II vet. I'm sure that contributed to the cancer. He dies, and I sort of use that as an excuse almost to go off, right? So my drinking, I get a job out of college. He's just died. My drinking becomes daily. My boss is an alcoholic. She's still an alcoholic. I really am not sure how she's alive. She just drinks all day, every day. So we, of course, bond immediately. And I'm having liquid lunches with her almost immediately at a place called Le Veau d'Or, an old school little French restaurant. I'm having martinis or whiskey and soda for lunch. I'm sneaking alcohol back into my workplace. I'm on a retail floor drinking vodka hidden in Mountain Dew. It's all day, going into all night. Cocaine comes in for the first time around then. I mean, I dabbled in it in college, and I dabbled in a little bit of meth before we had it. It was called glass. Didn't like it because the effects were so bad, and cocaine I could afford, so why not do the better one? So I have a job 4 years. My life is not getting better at all. This is where the progression really begins, and the shameful behavior is heavier in my story there, right? It starts to get worse and worse. So I think, I'm going to change everything. I am going to get a man. So I find a man who doesn't drink at all, take him hostage into my life. He drinks a shandy, which is half beer, half lemonade, and he'll sip it all night. So this is going to fix me, right? A man who doesn't fix me. Needless to say, doesn't fix me. I resent him. I treated him horribly. He's not a fantastic guy himself, but I treated him terribly. He was Scottish. So when he alone didn't fix it, I thought, well, if I move, everything will change. Everything will get better if we move to Scotland. No one drinks there. I mean, so it turns out the Scottish drink. It's a little bit different. Their timetables a little bit different, right? You got to get in the bar at 5 because it's going to close at midnight. And the bowling was open later. They call it the bowling. So I would drink there like every night, heavily. I'd always want to go bowling. Barry was like, again with the bowling? So whatever, I get more miserable there. I'm cheating on him in the grossest ways, like just so bad. I throw myself down the stairs one time just to get attention. Every night I'm like running across the moors from our shitty little town to buy wine before the supermarket closes. Life doesn't get better. So we didn't have the term ghost at the time, but I ghost him. And I just leave Scotland. And I leave him with his shitty family. And I'm just like, out. My life's going to be better. First night back in New York, I am drunker than I've ever been. All the shameful behaviors. Didn't use cocaine, so major blackout there that night. And I came into AA the next day. I couldn't take it. I saw the book on my shelf, Living Sober, and I came in and I stayed sober for 4 years. Happy, joyous, and free? Absolutely not. Miserable, eating, getting fatter. Easy to go out. My sponsor goes out. I use that as an excuse. Easy peasy. Now I am mostly at home drinking and eating, drinking and eating, drinking and eating. I don't like that. I don't like loneliness. I'm terrified of loneliness because I've always felt lonely inside, so I think the company of others is going to fix me. I find a new crowd of people. I start to lose weight. I find a very fancy crowd of people who can afford to buy all the cocaine. And AA had taught me how to drink a little better. Like I could function, I could keep my job. So I did these nights. Thursday was the new Friday. I would always miss Friday at work and I would drink through the weekend. Coke, drink, Coke, drink. It allowed me to drink the way I wanted. It stopped the blackouts. But it was always like 48, sometimes 72 hours of partying. And then I might miss a Monday at work too. The excuses were insane. My poor boss, I had so many surgeries, and I would be like Googling all the details of the surgery. Be like, it's got to be laparoscopic, and I would make, a lot of the surgeries were female, so I was like, well, I have this cyst. How many cysts I've had removed laparoscopically? Like, I mean, the poor man. Like, it was, and like, I make it so he can't, anyway. Good at I was a great liar, like, fantastic. Until I'm not anymore. I mean, every Monday, every Friday, you can't have a surgery. My last year before getting sober this time, which is, I can almost safely say is my last. I hate it. I hate it. I have rewired my brain. No joy comes from even thinking about being drunk. Literally no joy. Because where it brought me, the things I did when I was drunk to myself, the way I hurt myself, is so horrible. I can never be in that place again emotionally. I can never wake up with the shame and anxiety and terror that I woke up with. Never again. 22 days sick before, 22 days out of work the year before I got sober. In that year, I lost weight. I quit smoking. Cold turkey, I'm back on the nicotine now because it doesn't make me as hungry and I've still got food issues. Helps my hunger. I came in, the last night drinking was like every other, stupid bad date, whatever, do the shameful things. I come back, I do everything differently from the time before. I get a serious sponsor who makes me go through the steps. A way, not her way. She says there is a way through this. I am an atheist. She says there is a way through this, secularly. She takes me through it, but she's still hardcore, And by hardcore, she's not asking me to give up a baby, right? She's asking me to call her every morning at 7:30 and do the steps with her. Like, that is not a big ask. And if you can't wrap your mind around that, come on. I mean, what the fuck? Have you ever done anything then? Like, let's move through this. That's not a big ask. So I did it. I read the book. I did the steps. I did everything differently. I cleared the fog. When I cleared the fog, I was able to see the problems. Step 6 and 7 were really where it was at for me. That is cognitive behavioral therapy at its finest. Identify the problem, change the thought immediately. Your first thought is not something you have control over, but your next thought and your next action is. That's where the change was for me. I cleared the fog. And what had once been work, 6 and 7 were work. Hearing the voice, I used to, when I crossed the street, this is the self-loathing at its finest, I would literally think to myself, you're so disgusting and hideous that if it weren't the law to say stopped at that red light, all these people would just drive over you. they'd hit you. Like, what? And how I was so creative in my self-loathing is phenomenal. I mean, that's a thought. Slowly the fog cleared. I realized I also had other mental health issues, intense anxiety, and now I didn't have medication for it. And I realized life was going to stay pretty shitty if I didn't take care of that. So I did. I went to a psychiatrist. I talked my therapy out. I've been in and out of that in sobriety, but that wasn't the key for me. The key for me was medication. And I found a great shrink and I started taking it, and that was the second part of what was life-changing for me. I don't know if I'd be able to stay sober. I don't know if I'd be a recovered alcoholic today if I hadn't admitted that other problem I had. If I hadn't admitted that I had what many people consider a weakness but is not. If I hadn't admitted I had mental health problems too, I'm not certain it would be quite so easy now to do this. Alcohol saved my life for many years. AA was by far the best thing that ever happened to me. I could not have done this alone. I needed support. My higher power was group of drunks because I couldn't do it alone. I just couldn't. I needed support. AA gave it to me without question. They gave me hope. They helped me find Lexapro. They gave me everything I needed in the beginning. And then I started finding what I needed within me. I started healing. I started changing. I started looking at my defects. I don't always like that. Let's say damages. Let's say the things that I had to develop a thick skin for. I had to be defensive to save my life. Once I started doing that, life got better and better. And I've had problems. I'm having financial problems now. It sucks. I would never drink over it. It will not solve it, and it will not make me feel better about it. It will not solve it.
Will not make it worse.
It will make it worse. I was $250,000 in debt before I got sober, right? That's where alcohol brought me. Anyway, what AA gave me was something, people say you'll have a life beyond your wildest dreams. I never had a fucking dream. I didn't think I'd live past age 30. So what AA gave me wasn't a life beyond my wildest dreams. It was just a life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.